shivering, for example, when he's approaching the board or has to interact with the board. As much as a board, obviously, this point has been reiterated to death now, has to be majority independent and non-executive. It's also very important to empower executive on the board as well. If the executive is not on the board, they don't buy into the strategy. And if they're not buying into the strategy, then they're not buying into the long-term sustainability of the company overall. And so, conflict, to Mark's earlier point, is healthy, across the board, because it brings in different views, and it forces one to expand their mind to thinking that they otherwise would not, think about. And if you don't have that and everyone is a yes man around the table, that's a sure signal, that we are not necessarily thinking of all the risks that we need to think about in order to mitigate and, ensure that it's sustainable into the future. So I think the CEO, the CFO, and any other any other executive that's placed on the board needs to have an open door relationship with the board members. And the one way to do that is to include them in, not just strategy input, but to actually include them in strategy implementation. If the board is dictating to the executive management who are hands-on in dealing with the problems on the ground for a company, and there's no buy-in from the executive, it's not going to be successful, not for the long term anyways. So one way to to deal with conflict and have healthy conflict, because there is a difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict, and there's only room for healthy conflicts, in my opinion, and a corporate.
Tell us, what's the difference in this context, difference between healthy and unhealthy, if you can even provide examples to really paint the picture for us?
I think unhealthy conflict is often a product of lack of communication. And lack of communication often comes in when you are not necessarily aligned, just from an ideal and goals perspective. And if you're not aligned from an ideals and goal perspective, what often happens is that you don't necessarily want to engage and communicate with people that aren't on the same page as you. And so you avoid that communication. With one of our startups, we came in, and the founding CEO had, a great background and was very well placed to run this company, in our opinion, when we invested, in the direction that we saw it going for, the IRRs that we target. But what happened, and the board was already set up when we came in, and it compromised of him and the CFO, and 3 other board members, which, they had elected, and then we had an observer seat at that stage, having invested a convertible note. And the CEO made decisions that weren't in the best interest of investors, not in the best interest of the employees, as well as the long-term sustainability of the company. And they were able to do so because they were surrounded by yes men and women, and that's exactly what I mean by lack of communication and the danger that comes in. Because instead of having conversations around why certain decisions are being made, and there's no formal structures in place to sign off resolutions and to sign off decisions, he was able to make those decisions independent of the board, non-executive included. So it's unhealthy conflict, like I've said, when there's lack of communication and there isn't alignment overall. Healthy conflict